Greetings. Do you have any idea what the largest sector of the global economy is? It's energy. And in 2014 and in recent years, we are hearing all about global warming, climate change, greenhouse gases. Something must be done to transition our energy sector globally and reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, get away from nuclear fission. And the solutions that are being put forward are principally solar panels, wind turbines, biodiesel fuels, covering our roadways with photovoltaic technology. Did you know that our own federal government in the United States has been officially locking down and keeping from open circulation a vast range of clean, revolutionary energy and transportation technologies that our world desperately needs? If you're like most people, your answer to that question is no, I was not aware of that. It doesn't sound possible. Well, it's possible, and it's very well documented. The New Energy Declaration campaign is something I hope you will endorse and circulate to your friends on Facebook, to your make known among your friends and family and acquaintances networks. It's a very important initiative, and it's one that I think has a great potential for traction because it hits us in our economic private lives where we all have concerns. This energy sector being the largest in the global economy, gasoline expenditures, cost of fuel being integrated into food prices, manufactured good prices, transportation prices around the planet, very much throttles human progress and is a key contributor to endemic poverty. This has been true for many, many decades. So there's nothing, on the flip side of that coin, there's nothing that could liberate human potential more dramatically than to have breakthrough, clean, revolutionary, fuelless energy sources for transportation, also for residential and commercial power. But most people don't think that's possible, or that will require decades more of the energy firms, the Department of Energy, and so forth doing research and development. And this is all a vast misperception, because the reality is that we have had revolutionary energy technologies, including the ability to run all of our internal combustion engines strictly from water, continually surfacing for 50 plus years. The most problematic factor within that cluster of suppression pressures during the post-World War II period has been our own U.S. government and its international partnering agreements, which go through the intelligence agencies networks, and the Pentagon is associated with this, the Patent and Trade Office is tied into it, and so forth. The more ancient, if you will, historic dynamic for suppressing the revolutionary, clean, free energy technologies that humanity and Mother Earth so need is something we call black shelving. And that comes out of the major energy firms, and it goes all the way back to the history regarding Nikola Tesla with J.D. Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan. Nikola Tesla 100 years ago had radical free energy technologies for all applications: residential and commercial, off-grid power, distributed power, transmitted wirelessly, transportation applications involving free energy technologies. And it was the combination of the collaboration, collusion between J.D. Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan that shut him down. And that's a well-documented story. There's books that have been written just about that topic. And it involved pressure on George Westinghouse, not to support Tesla and so forth. But while other technologies came forward in the pre-World War II period, such as Lester Hendershot and his amazing over unity free energy generator, etc., tapping into background energy sources, higher dimensional energy sources, and so forth. The suppression of revolutionary energy technologies in the post-World War II period has been more difficult by an order of magnitude. And this associates with the passage of the 1951 Invention Secrecy Act, which was part of the national security legislation of the 1940s, early 50s period, including the 1947 National Security Act, the 1949 CIA Act, which created the CIA and ultimately this huge cluster of so-called intelligence agencies that we have today, and the 1951 Invention Secrecy Act, whose purpose initially was to try to prevent weapons advantages on the part of potential adversaries. But what's happened with that legislation is, as in the case of Stan Meyer in the 1970s, an inventor that comes out with the ability to run internal combustion engines strictly from water, involving advanced electrolysis, producing hydrogen gases and oxygen out of water at a level of efficiency 20 or more times greater than what the textbooks will say based on Faraday's equations and so forth. And he was given offers for huge amounts of money to buy out that technology. This was in the 1970s, well-documented story. Half a dozen plus, in the neighborhood of a dozen inventors that we have documented who all have had this water technology, none of which has made it to market for reasons that I'm describing here. Mr. Meyer realized that this major amount of money that was being offered to him was really to black shelf his technology. It was coming from the big energy sector. They had no intention of distributing the technology because they already have all the money in the world. They have geopolitical control via their control of the global energy sector. They just want to shut down any competitive threat to their control and to this, really to the stranglehold they have on humanity and nature via the big energy sector. So he resisted those pressures. The next thing that happened was the Pentagon showed up in on his door, and he's given testimony about this. He's no longer with us, and said they were secretizing his technology because it was a national security issue. Now, keep in mind, we're in a world that's full of shoulder-mounted missiles, and today in 2014 we're being inundated with all the stories about ISIL over in the Mideast, who's retaken all of the expensive weapons costing hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars that the U.S. taxpayers are on the hook for, and now another group getting a hold of these. We're in a world full of dangerous weapons technologies, including nuclear weapons and just about everything you can imagine. A man running a dune buggy, a Volkswagen engine strictly on water, and saying, I've got plans for a $1,500 kit. I want all Americans to buy this, and people around the world. I want to end this insane dependence on foreign petroleum sources. And I understand it's connected with our wars, our military policy, very much to do with what's going on in Iraq in the last 20 years. Tragic story. What's going on in Afghanistan. There's big energy resources at the base of both those stories in terms of the real motives for these huge drains on the U.S. Treasury, huge damages to foreign nations, huge strains in our foreign relations, all needless, but Al Gore's not telling us about this. The mainstream media is not telling us about this, but it's widely known throughout the highest levels of the intelligence agencies, the big energy sector, in the media, in government. This is an open secret, if you will. It's only the global peasantry, we the people, supposedly the people of our nation whom our government represents, that are not being given the straight story. Photovoltaic solar technology cannot solve our problems. It produces power at multiples on a per kilowatt per megawatt basis of compared to existing solutions such as fossil fuels. It cannot be applied to the transportation sector of the world, and the transportation sector is a huge problem, a huge drain on human energy, talent, incomes, etc., a huge factor in endemic poverty throughout the developing nations. Even where people cannot afford their own vehicles, they're paying this insane artificial high price of fossil fuels in the form of bus fares, taxi fares, school bus pickup for their children, and this sort of thing. It's crazy. There is a set of unpublished guidelines, not circulated to the public, not confessed to, whereby every patent that's filed for in the United States, whether it's an energy or transportation technology getting over a certain level of efficiency, automatically goes to the security group and is reviewed. And then what happens is, if it's something really promising that our world needs, it is locked down, it is secretized. If the private sector energy firms do not step in first and buy it up and black shelve it, and they realize that in doing that, they're not going to be sued for antitrust violations as they should be, they will get involved in arson threats, assassination threats, and so forth. They realize that the FBI, the NSA, the others who tap communications, who are aware of these things, are not going to come down on them, because if they do not take that revolutionary technology out of circulation, then the CIA will step in and do it on the taxpayer's dime. The public, none the wiser for it. Folks, we have between 50 and 100 well-documented cases of this type of suppression in the post-World War II period, with courtroom-grade evidence. Our country, when it was founded 200 years ago, the United States, it was the concept of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and a break from the corruption that existed in the royal governments of Europe and the feudal societies of Europe. It was to be a government of, by, and for the people, following constitutional principles, Bill of Rights principles, constitutional law, a balance of checks and powers between the branches of government that worked, a fourth estate independent media that would ride herd on all these processes and report to we the people, so that our representatives in government would be doing our bidding, because the true sovereigns of our world are human beings. Only human beings have natural sovereignty. And we then lend our sovereignty to a government, such as the government we created here in the United States 200 years ago, to be a social structure for us that we have approved of and set into place. But if that social structure and government breaks all of the founding rules to the point that it is just a rogue creature, it's like a Frankenstein walking down the hall at midnight dragging chains, it's time for we the people to do a timeout. So this New Energy Declaration campaign that I have come up with initially in 2010, it's been in mothballs for about 4 years. Now in 2014 I'm relaunching it. It is an opportunity for we the people, the American public, to say to our government, we need to talk. We need to talk about this largest sector of the global economy, energy, that we're all being bothered about and driven into hysteria about the concerns of greenhouse gases and carbon cap and trade and more regulation and more taxation and simpler lifestyles, and the middle class is being hollowed out. We have more and more economic strain, more and more people on food stamps, and if we think it's bad here, live in the developing nations where things have always been worse. We need to talk because we want to know if it's true that you, our government, meant to represent us, according to constitutional and Bill of Rights principles, have been, without our foreknowledge and without our approval, locking down a huge range involving hundreds of commercially viable technologies in the Section 181 portfolio of the 1951 Invention Secrecy Act for decades. Some of these have been locked down for 20, 30 years plus. We have the whistleblower testimony and other testimony corroborating this. And that you turn a blind eye when the intelligence agencies and the FBI and others pick up that the private energy firms are locking down these technologies, black shelving them, because we the people feel that really national security is being destroyed by what you're doing, and we would be a much more secure nation, not to mention a much happier society with much more opportunity, with a much higher standard of living, with a brand new set of manufacturing and service skills we need to share with the whole world community that needs this technology if we had these solutions. Is it true you have been locking these down? Is it true you have not been providing protection to inventors, etc., small firms? And the vast majority of these technologies, folks, for 100 years, and especially well documented in the last 50, have come from America. Huge, huge economic strength for our nation foregone. Huge stability. And the primary driver of this unbelievably expensive military industrial sector that Dwight Eisenhower warned us about has been coveting, protecting, and trying to gather more global energy supplies. Because the big energy boys and the military industrial sector and the armament sector, this group at the top, tied into these groups like the Bilderbergers, Committee of 300, etc., CFR, realize that the energy sector, the transportation sector, is key to coveting geopolitical power. But this is not the kind of foreign policy we had in mind when we founded this nation. We were to be a light on the hill. We were to be an example of ethics in the way we conducted our domestic policy and our foreign policy. And it has all gone in serious latter-day Rome directions, a decade at a time, to the point where now we can say, you know, Dwight Eisenhower knew what he was talking about when he gave his farewell speech to the nation, and he said, beware of the threats to our way of life and our democracy that exist in a profit and empire-driven military-industrial sector that's going to cover up all of its true motives potentially and secretize vast aspects of our public life. And this is what's happened. There is nothing more important to transitioning our world for the better than getting the lockdown, suppressed, breakthrough clean energy and transportation technologies out and on an accelerated basis. We need a truth and reconciliation process to facilitate this. We need $1 trillion plus new energy restorative justice fund in place before the year 2020 and acting. We need to cut our military sector way down, and with the vast majority of that activity and personnel, pivot it to doing constructive things in our world. We can have a new energy plank domestically and globally. We can have a new health plank domestically and globally. We need to make changes, folks, or we're heading down a water world, Hunger Games, Orwellian type path. So let's have a public debate on this subject matter, and let's have the white hat types from within the intelligence agencies, the FBI, the Pentagon. I want to ask all such to endorse this new energy declaration, circulate it among your contacts, have them also endorse it, and donate to this campaign. I am going to be spending as much of my time personally as I can on this campaign to publicize it, to have related interviews on an ongoing basis, and I need help to do that, to meet my basic living expenses and so forth. This is a campaign for people to get behind, and it ties into related campaigns that are very important, such as the Breakthrough Energy Movement, the New Energy Movement, Foster Gamble's Thrive Movement, Sterling Allen's projects, Dr. Greer's projects, and others. We need to reinvent. We need, first of all, for the truth to come out. This is a public education process. This is a process of having public debate about secretized subject matter. An open government and a secret government are two different things. When we founded this nation, we were trying to have the open and the honest government. When we installed a national security state, presumably with some justifications in the post-World War II era, we allowed something to grow inside the open democracy that has become a cancer and a huge parasitic organism ultimately that is not any longer a limited defense capability. That in itself is justified. That's not what we have. And the big energy sector is an integral part of that whole thing, the military-industrial component with other elements associated with armaments, Wall Street, and so forth. So it's time for this national debate. This will lead to a truth and reconciliation process of some sort, because on an informal basis that is already going on, really, and will be going on with YouTube interviews and all kinds of materials, etc. There may be a place for citizens' grand juries, this type of thing, I don't know. But I think that as at least even an informal truth and reconciliation process gets going over the next several years, that there will be a process of naming and shaming that will bring many to the table who have been involved in these suppression dynamics, have benefited enormously and have garnered tens of billions, hundreds of billions, and more of revenues, because this has been going on for a long time. They realize unethically. And I think many of these groups will get behind an effort to now release these technologies on an accelerated basis, because it's becoming increasingly clear that with regard to their own grandchildren and our whole world, we're moving into a Hunger Games, Mad Max type scenario if we don't turn the corner. And most who have been involved in the suppression of this, they're just going along with what their institution does, with what higher up on the organogram in big energy, in the intelligence agencies, in the Pentagon, in PTO, they're told to do. And yet many have increasingly been uncomfortable with this. The general public is clueless about it, and they're not comfortable with that either. And then in terms of the general public, I mean, there's going to be a lot of anger, but there's also going to be a lot of enthusiasm to realize, hey, we don't have to cover all our roadways with solar panel photovoltaic technology that's going to cost an arm and a leg, and energy's already too expensive, and it can't solve the transportation needs, but here's this stuff that we can do. We can be running our cars on water. We just have to get the Pentagon to stop locking it down, and we have to get the FBI formally involved in protecting us, along with local law enforcement, along with the Department of Justice. CIA can just sort of back out of it. And whatever's needed, and civil society awareness, local communities also involved in helping provide support and protection, and we can turn the corner on this. So please sign this new energy declaration and consider it an endorsement, a ratification. Circulate it to others that you know through your social networks and otherwise, and let's move forward toward creating a much better world for all of us. Thank you.